Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. So why is there a key turning point in the human story where I'm complaining and they're dying and they're going off to hell and they're full of regret? And for those of you who are too dumb to believe that there is an afterlife and there's punishment and there's an ultimate kind of reckoning for the principles of justice, the spirit of justice, they go to their deathbed if they don't die immediately or something, and they start feeling full of regret almost every time, if not every time. And they think about how they left their offspring to be screwed to suffer the same miserable lives that they've lived, acting like children, acting like arrogant and bitter demons, what have you. Well, how did we get to this point here? Well, let's look at the structuring of society. Society is very much like a boarding school, right? It's like one big prison. Okay, think about how hospitals are. There's certain areas where you need a key card or you need a key to get to those areas. Okay, it's very much like a prison or a boarding school. In a boarding school, you know, where you might have the headmaster, the principal has a quarters. Okay, there's certain gated areas, what have you. Now, what are they there for exactly? Why is it structured that way? It's like the colonial military designed society. Right? They said we're going to put this here and that there because it's like a prison. You know, why is it so boring in society, right? The board of education. Why do they control who dates who? You have a bunch of lunatics saying, hey, we don't want you there and we don't want you around. Or they might say they don't want you to date their daughter or hanging out with their son. Okay, and when you put all these things together and you ask yourself, why are there these racists? Why are there these sadistic people? Why are they producing serial killers from the sheer madness of their culture? Why are there tens of millions of people into rock and roll and heavy metal and so on and so forth? Because they're responding to the prison the same way the Aryan Brotherhood or the Mexican Mafia or the Black Guerrilla family or whatever is responding to the prison system. They're responding to a system of sadists, a system of sexual sadists who have purposely created an economy that causes people to whore themselves. That's why there's so many sex workers in this country, right? Especially if you count strippers, okay? It is outrageous how they proceed. That's why there's so many gold diggers. 20% of females in some studies have said that they marry for money and that love to them isn't so important because they're so used to a failed system, a failed generational building coming from the West. Now keep in mind, at this point, every nation fails, but they fail because the global system is centered in the West, and the West has failed. And I'm not saying that China and Japan haven't failed, they have failed as well. Every nation on this planet has failed, and the main reason why is the Western system that comes from Greece and Rome. It is an occult system. It is a system of use, confuse, and abuse for the ruse, for their schemes. They're mockers, scoffers, and schemers. And the schemes of folly are sin. And people detest a mocker. Now, not everyone who detests a mocker is a good person, right? Narrow is the way to life, broad is the way to destruction. So what ends up happening is they end up channeling demons because they detest the demons who have structured the system. And so when you look at this in terms of economics, when you look at this in terms of the economy, it is clear that a lot of people fail to move as masterfully as they otherwise would because they're responding to the sexual sadism and the sexual deviance, deviating from God's plan that's coming from the governing class, just like in Greece and Rome. When you look at the history of the West, the Greeks and the Romans spread their sexual immorality into what was known to them as the barbarian lands that had their own sexual immorality. So it was the unholy marriage of Roman and Greek paganism with, say, Nordic paganism, what have you. And what it spawned was the continuity of the foolish builders in Babylon, whose core design, whose central organizing principle was the same central organizing principle of Greece and Rome. And as a result, you have a very detestable system. Now people might say, well, why don't you go somewhere else? Well, it's a global system. How can you, who are the center of the global system, who play a contrast game with the other nations, trying to make it so you seem like the ideal place to be, how can you then tell me to go to another country? You have ruined every country in the world, and everyone knows it. And it's not just Rockefeller and your Council on Foreign Relations historically, right? The Rockefeller family, what have you. There are millions of you who work together to ruin the entire world. And you work together in a way that was so clear and it was so obvious that people must explain that even JFK said it is a society run by secret orders, right? With their secret meetings, their secret proceedings, and their secret societies. So instead of having a democracy, you have a secret government system. And then you have the nerve to persecute me for being honest enough to say what the problem is and what the solution is. You refuse to debate me. You deny me my freedom of speech and my freedom of assembly by running psychological operations on me that are designed to isolate me from the general public. A completely despicable thing. You are the exact opposite of a constitutional state. You are a feudal system. And so your families have become futile. There's no purpose, right? They're purposeless. They're senseless. Their lives are pointless. It's heartbreaking, but it's the truth. Better is open rebuke than love that is concealed. The truth sets you free, not flattery. Lying lips hate those who hurt, those they hurt, and a flattering mouth works ruin. And the word ruin is a play on words for you're in. You're on board, the BOA road, right? Board. For those of you who didn't catch that, the word board is a play on words for BOA road. And so the board of education is the boa, the snake, the python, the BOA road of education. And the word school is a play on words for looks, with a C and an H instead of a K. That's not a coincidence. Because these people with these fancy degrees, they sabotage me because they can't beat me at a debate. My self-education far transcends their laughable Ivy League school educations. They did not allow them the insight or the foresight to make a system that is respectable, to end homelessness, to have a strong economy. There's been a massive wealth transfer in the last 70 years, and economics is about how you deal with scarcity. Do you think how you deal with scarcity is neglect the poor and sexually abuse them? Or were you raised by the devil himself? The word heart is a play on words for he art. Their arts and crafts are the arts and crafts of the crafty, of those who have no scruples, those who have no ethics, no morals, who have laughable values. And so as these final days are coming, before humanity is completely sealed in hell with no possible moral path forward, I want you to ask yourselves, why these monsters who recommended legalizing prostitution instead of having a fair economy? Why these beasts who work through their proxies? Why didn't they try to mitigate? The word gate is even in the word mitigate. The might of God that's aimed right at the enemies of God, those who uphold the Babylonian system of the whore, the prostitute. You know, the whore who is the prostitute, the beast, and the dragon. So when put at odds with the might of God, they put you and your families and your offspring at odds with the might of God. And they didn't even mitigate when the word gate, Christ, the gate, is in the word mitigate. How ironic is that?